Okay, so I tried making this video like 10 times and it's really tough because this is a bigger topic. And usually the way I make these videos is really rough and it's not super scripted. I write something down and I sort of just go off of the dome with it. I just like cue cards almost. And I think I'm going to stick to that philosophy here, but I'm going to say now that the focus of the video is basically the themes of Dark Souls 2 and more specifically how the intro sets us up for those, but I will be talking about how those themes are present throughout the game still. I think a lot of times when I hear criticisms of Dark Souls 2's intro, I think people don't really necessarily understand what it's trying to do. It doesn't understand, Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3 introduce the world or the state of the world or the history and like what our purpose as undead is within it. And Dark Souls 2 doesn't go for that. It barely tells us anything about the text of the game. So I think what it instead does is it talks about the themes that we will be going into and the questions that we at least should be asking when we play the game. And I think to me as Brogan, I think the questions the game ultimately tries to ask is, what is identity and what makes, you who you are? And there's other questions, obviously, that's some sort of Cliff Notes version of it. But, to preface that, I think there's some questions that you should think of before even like approaching this text, right? So, questions that you should ask yourself every day regarding identity. So like, every 10 years, almost all of your body's cells will die and be replaced with new cells. It's like a ship of Theseus problem. If you replace every board on the ship of Theseus, is it still the ship of Theseus? Is what makes it that, right? And if you had the cells, if the cells you had when you were a child no longer exist, how are you still you, right? And some do stay around from birth to death, like certain neurons responsible for memories. Maybe it's your memories that make up your identity, but memories and your thoughts and your logic and personality can be tricky because they change. Memories are not an accurate portrayal of reality. They're a distorted perspective of reality. You are not a reliable source for your own memories. Maybe it's your DNA, maybe it's your blood, that stuff doesn't change, right? But your DNA has been passed from your ancestors. It can be traced all the way back and you can find identity within that, but also your DNA does not entirely determine your personality or your life choices. I think that's evident too. Your DNA does not make you entirely who you are because, identical twins would be living identical lives. Maybe it's the choices you make, right? And that's a really good answer. And with that, we're going to bookmark it. And then we're going to keep asking more questions as we look into the Dark Souls 2 intro and see what the game at large has to say regarding identity.
Perhaps you've seen it. Maybe in a dream. A murky, forgotten land.
Okay, so throughout FromSoft games, Merck has been a concept that is really embraced and utilized. To define it, I would say it's a dirty obscurity that hides truth. It's like a filthy obscurity that hides truth. It's almost like a fog, but it's like a dirty fog, right? So later on in the game, the ancient dragon clone will cite the Merck shifting and stirring, and that's what brought you to him. Bloodborne has a lot of similarities to Dark Souls 2, and it's probably ultimately better at conveying these ideas thematically because at the very least, people responded to it better, I guess. But, Bloodborne uses the idea of Merc to great effect. And, you could, if you need an explicit example off the top, Saint Adeline's use of the word Merc is very extensive in terms of, transcendence and what have you. To bring forth another idea, dreaming of Drang Lake is interesting because this game makes a tie between dreams and memories. Shalquar calls you entering the giant's memories as entering their dreams. Nashandra Mithra says the giants are slumbering. What's happening here is the giants' memories seem to be how they want to remember their times in battle, and that's not to say that everything's one-to-one, and that's not to say that these memories aren't memories or didn't happen, because, there is like a cause and effect relationship. The last giant remembers you when you killed him as the giant lord. But again, your memories aren't that different from dreams. Bloodborne gets a lot of mileage out of blending reality and dreams, and I sincerely hope that's a self-evident claim, but we'll keep touching on the idea between dreams and realities as we move forward and sort of expand the definition of that.
A place where souls may mend your ailing mind. You will lose everything. Once branded, the symbol of the curse, an augur of darkness. Your past, your future, your very light. None will have meaning, and you won't even care. By then, you'll be something other than human.
So the start of this segment is fascinating because it's probably the most backstory we ever get on a Souls protagonist. Who are these people? Clearly they matter to us, yet, they're slipping away. They're melting before our eyes. I think many people first think that it's a wife and child, but it could be anybody we know. It could be friends. It could be, that child could be you and that woman can be your mother. What's important here is that the idea of memory loss, of identity loss, losing everything and what that means for you as a person and how you turn into something that's not human when you lose those things. The meaning of these ideas start to scrub away with time. And I think people start to interact with these games initially when they first start as like newbies or whatever. They try to make parallels between the undead curse and dementia or Alzheimer's or something. And that's not unreasonable, right? You see things like Lucatiel and Lap, and they seem to be direct examples of sudden identity or memory loss. And it's really tragic, but I think it's meant to be more than that. For the rest of this series and Dark Souls 2 especially, it tries to paint the idea of all cursed things, as losing identity is something all cursed things will eventually suffer for. And, the curse is life, not of some branding, even though they may be the same, right? Here's to put it another way with a personal anecdote. I hope this isn't too heavy for this kind of video, but my mother passed away when I was 17. And I remembered her, and I still remember her, but it's getting harder. It's getting harder every day to really remember what she was like versus what my memories and dreams are turning her to become. I'm starting to lose what her face looks like, and I'm starting to forget what she sounds like. This is my own mother, and the woman who served as like the foundation for who I am today, morally and spiritually, just fucking everything, right? It's your mom, right? So how am I still that same person today? How am I still that child today if I'm losing that identity? I'm losing a part of myself when I'm losing her. And I think that's a really potent image. Dark Souls 2 just drops in a single image. Losing everything with a woman's face melting, right? That's really cool. To talk about other things, the shack the blind woman is giving us a fortune in also sets up the idea of fate with the spider and the thread. Fate is another concept played with in Dark Souls, especially in 2. Are you a pawn of fate? Aldia says he tried to shed the yoke of fate. We sort of have to ask ourselves, are we able to spite what fate is? And is it in our nature to try to no matter what? What do we do when our fate is bleak and we have no answers? Do we rise above? Do we link the fire when we are doomed to fail and fail all the time and time again? To me, the question actually becomes, if your fate is predetermined, then how do your choices matter? And if your choices don't matter, then how do they make your identity? If your choices don't matter, how the fuck are you? This goes back to that problem again.
A thing that feeds on souls, a hollow.
I want to highlight an irony here that is informed by later experience with lore. Practically everything is devouring souls or yearning for souls. Hunger is something that's just within everything. You know, all these mindless creatures we're fighting. Hollowness is a direct consequence from lack of identity here. When you've lost what made you, you've become a mindless zombie in any other terms. But keep in mind, I don't necessarily think being a hollow means being mindless. Londor hollows are an exception to hollows that proves to us things aren't necessarily black and white. And, you know, you can be just as greedy as a human as you are a hollow. You know, Mothlan, for instance, is very greedy, and he is not a hollow. He's nowhere coming close to a hollow. He keeps collecting souls, but actually it's his greed that transforms him, right? I think all of that says something to what identity can be.
Long ago, in a walled-off land far to the north, a great king built a great kingdom. I believe they called it Drang Lake. Perhaps you're familiar. No, how could you be? But one day, you will stand before its decrepit gate without really knowing why.
Did you catch that? She asks if you're familiar with the land, and then questions how it would even be possible. It's quite possible, actually, if you're undead. Perhaps you really are from Drang Lake, and you're recalling these visions in your dreams, and they're actually memories. Maybe, or maybe not. This line is later echoed by Shanala. Shanala also says that her manifestation led us here. Many have speculated that the old lady is just a projection of Shanala. I'm unsure if that's true, but I think there are many things curious about Shanala that I want to talk about here. First of all, Shanala was basically made when Vendrick and Aldia approached the clone of the ancient dragon. She was a failure in escaping fate. When she dies, she drops a feather. This feather is curious because it takes us back to bonfires as a coiled sword fragment or a homeward miracle or a bone would. The bonfire is home for the undead, and even the dark sign when activated returns us to a bonfire as our home. The feather tells us that this child of dragons imagined endless possibilities from the feather. This imagination can be similar to dreams. And this may be Shanalot's power, to morph the world of Drang Lake to her imagination. This can explain how she can appear anywhere. The other way to understand the feather is it's a way to tie her back to here. It connects the bonfires because Drang Lake is still her home and she's bound here. She can't leave it, but the feather is all she has to imagine a different world. Maybe she's more sinister than that. Maybe the manifestation is luring us into a trap. Drang Lake in general is rooted in a tempting darkness. Navlang calls into question how genuine she is. Okay, so to be clear, I don't necessarily think I'm like the bold statement that Shanala is the only soul tempter here. I think the bigger picture is that Drangleic and the Abyss, or even the souls within, because even fucking Vendrick says that when you know the dark fade, or when dark enters and fire fades, souls will reemerge. So there's an appeal, there's an allure to Drang Lake. There's multiple times, for instance, that people say that they're allured because of the greatness of souls, or their own greed, or their urge to prove themselves in combat. There's a lot of other instances to where they feel drawn to this, but what's important is that they are drawn to it, and it is almost like fate. You'll also see multiple times where NPCs say fate has brought us together in many different ways. Even I didn't list it, but Kale the cartographer also says fate brought us together. There's different forces at work to do this, and it may all be pushing you towards linking the fire.
into a flame. Your wings will burn in anguish. Time after time. For that is your fate. The fate of the cursed.
When you're rowing into Drang Lake, it's in ruins. Bright bugs crowned around a single tree. The moon turns blood red as the bright bugs start to swarm around here. As the bugs swarm, it agitates the rest of the darkness. You know, the lake is filled with corpses. It's fucking skeleton lake down there. But the darkness actually allows for a beautiful reflection. Do you see that reflection in the water? It's of Drang Lake before it became ruins. That's a memory. That reflection is a memory. You know, so we've got now a tie between memories, dreams, and reflections, and that is actually conveyed into the game later on too with mirrors. The lake opens a vortex portal and you're drawn into it and you fall in. You know, what led you here? Was it fate or did something call for you? Are you meant to stay in Drang Lake forever? Is it only until you link the fire? Did you have something else you needed to do outside of Drang Lake? Don't you have a home? Don't you have people waiting for you? These ideas are hinted at throughout the game, and they intentionally lose focus as you play. Aldia even asks you why you are making the choices you do. And maybe you don't know why. Perhaps all we are and all the decisions we make are based on simple facts of nature. Are we nothing more than moths being guided to the flame? Us being framed as moths or pawns is worrying. And Dark Souls 2 asking us constantly if there's an escape is thematically pertinent. I don't want to make this mistake of fucking dying, right? But perhaps it's in our nature, and that nature is what fate is. The nature may be the thing that defines us and defines humanity. The game will continue with the ideas of identity, because this is the only game where we get the intro and all that juicy things betwixt gameplay before we even make our character. The former Firekeepers give us a human effigy, and supposedly it's shaped like us, and it allows us to remember who we are. Ultimately allows us to actually choose who we are. This can be seen with the soul vessels, because the soul vessels ultimately allow us to respec and changes who we are entirely. But perhaps the only ideas of identity and choice and fate are within the large scale. Because, you know, you may be asking like, hey, you know, all the Shanala, Vendrick, all this late game shit is very different from the normal stories of the NPCs and Covenants. You know, the intro isn't really talking about the themes of the entire game as it is just talking about the ending. So what the fuck are you talking about, bro? You know, where are you going to spend dozens of hours in your fucking 100-something hour game playing? Identity informs all characters, I think, here. These characters are just like us. They were called to Drang Lake for a reason, some for different reasons. You know, they're trapped here too. Some lose their mind here. Covenants in particular can be ultimately understood through the lens of identity. To talk about covenants is really useful here. The Brotherhood of Blood's Blood Crest Ring outright admits that the only thing an oath is really for is your own ambitions. You know, your own wants. You're fucking part of this covenant because you want to be. You're united with the covenant by your bloodlust, and everything else is secondary. And they're still identified as a brotherhood. You're now in a family bound by blood. The mirrors to the Brotherhood are actually the Blue Sentinels in the game. And the Blue Sentinels are bound by virtue and servitude and high ideals, right? By Dark Souls 3, they're outright servants of the Dark Moon Blades and sort of a translation of the Dark Moon Blades or an inspired, subsect or something, right? But Blue Sentinels in Dark Souls 2 have a very conflicted history. Their servitude of gods is actually a lie. The covenant was made out of a demand for protection, and it developed into an entire covenant later. To outside observers, they're not actually that different from the Brotherhood of Blood. And the Brotherhood of Blood also doesn't see much of a difference either. Even if you were to call upon, the Blue Sentinels' ideals as a way for them to transcend and have identity over the Brotherhood's focus on vagrancy and their path for bloodshed, there's only one Blue Sentinel who actually keeps to this moral philosophy. The rest of the Blue Sentinels went to Vol'gin and became greedy extortionists. Outside of these covenants, the Dragon Covenant is largely about transforming and ascending above our corporeal existence, something we hear time and time again. Covenant of Champions is also a way to harden players. and give them a respect to them. You know, you forge your identity through difficulty and hardship. Not very complicated stuff. The Pilgrims of Dark have their own moral path and journey. You know, they examine the darkness within themselves and the darkness of the land, the roots of our world, ultimately, you know, the deepness that we don't know about, the mother of all, you know, and it's the light that shines our journey. It's self-examination. I'd argue that the most psychological area of Dark Souls is the dark chasm of old. I think much can be said for that shared existence and the hidden truths to ourselves. It's interesting because also the Sunlight Warriors Covenant has changed entirely for the sake of this idea of identity, or at the very least, the idea of changing and warping history. And to do a little side note here, I didn't talk about earlier, but you know, history forges an idea of who you are that's different than what you really were. You know, how is that not in itself a memory, and how is that not representative of a different kind of perspective of identity? You know, how history remembers you your identity? Because, you know, I'm sorry to say this, but like the Sunlight Warriors Covenant now regards everybody competing to become an heir to the sun. It's no longer worship of the firstborn, though that's still part of it. The medal itself literally says, on this day begins the contest to find the sun's truest son. And the covenant rewards actually both involve Solaire and the firstborn. This covenant can essentially make you into an heir of the sun. That's now the goal of the covenant, and I guess the goal of your identity at that point. I don't have much to say regarding the Bell Keepers, other than the puppets seem to be possessed by love, and this compels them to guard. And I think in this way, love motivates the player as well. Love is a strong enough motivation to give life to anything, or give purpose or identity to anything. In life, it's probably the most common answer to what our purpose is. Most of the time, I would say, you know, love of your family, love of, you know, your mate. These sorts of things are what life matters in, right? Maybe not, right? The Rat Covenant doesn't necessarily portray your identity through your desires. Instead, it actually portrays an irony regarding humans. The story of Dark Souls is largely a story about humans. We as humans have been abused by the gods, and we've been slaves to fate, and we live a miserable life. A lot of this was done to us, not by us. Yet this covenant, and indeed a lot of Dark Souls 2 in general, puts a lot of the blame back onto humans. Rats are often seen as disgusting, vile creatures of disease and filth. Yet the Rat King is largely honorable. In fact, servitude to him makes him change his opinion on humans. Because to him, humans are the ones you cannot trust. We agreed to share the world with them, then we invaded their homes for the sake of our own greed. We're the monsters. And, you know, you can see this elsewhere in Dark Souls 2 regarding, you know, the treatment of giants. Giants have been portrayed as barbarians, but they're the ones who we attacked. You know, we invaded them and we stole their strength. They were justified in their counter invasion. In Dark Souls 2, humans are the monsters gods were in Dark Souls 1 and 3. I'm just kidding. Indeed, even the gods of Dark Souls 2 represent more human ideas and attributes. Instead of purely natural phenomena, they're innately human concepts most of the time. Evelana was literally a human before history turned her into a god. So I ask again, what is identity? Who are we? To Aldia, by the end, there isn't an answer. This lack of an answer, this realization that no choice matters, nothing fucking, you'll lose everything, there's no identity. You know, that sort of thing is just as destructive as any delusion that regarding your identity that you may stop at until this point, regarding memories or goals or past experiences or DNA or whatever. Like, all of these things are also reasonable to stop at, right? Your experiences do matter. Your dreams matter. Your memories matter. Your DNA matters. Your choices matter. Your fate matters. You know, the reflections of who you are can be a prison. Absolutely. Yes. Yet our goal should not be to escape fate. It may be our nature, but at the end of the day, what makes our identity are the pieces we've picked up along the way to make it so. We'll lose these pieces as we grow older and pick new pieces up to create a new self. Identity is constantly changing, and our goal is to try to not lose everything. Or, if we do lose everything, come to terms and accept that fact. And this is just a small scratch on the surface for the sort of big ideas Dark Souls 2 really tried to go for. I think a smarter paper on it by someone better than me would really do wonders for appreciating this game's story. But I hope I gave some perspective just now on why I think Dark Souls 2 is special. Thanks for listening, everybody. Shut up, Brogan from the past. You're wrong. There was still things to mention. I'm not going to go super into the video. Like we're not going to add more to the runtime. However, that being said, I think I would be missing this a lot if I didn't at least say and pay lip service to two ideas regarding identity in this, which is kingship, monarchy, becoming a king once you've become self-actualized. I think monarchy in these terms and linking the fire and all these sorts of ideas go together with self actualization. And then the other thing I would say is I think one of the answers to the what makes you who you are question, at least in Dark Souls terms, is your soul, or at the very least the recurring archetype. You can definitely see in like the old ones how history seems to repeat itself, and these same figures keep coming back over and over again, and they either possess or just come about naturally as a cycle of the world. And these sorts of things that we fill into still have a huge part to play in identity. However, I think those are so big of topics, they deserve other videos. And I don't even know if I'm going to make those videos. But again, I think I would have regretted finishing this video if I didn't fucking mention them. So I'm mentioning them now. Thank you to everyone. I personally like to thank the ward, Rubito, Maxwell, Sophos, just anybody. If you've ever fucking posted in the ward and I talked to you, just thank you. Like Nobud, for instance, just anybody, Herb, just anybody. Last Pro Tag, even, I talked to him a good bit. I'm on his channel, or I'm on his server. Just anybody that ever contributes is just awesome. That's how this should go. And I guess the other last thing, and oh my gosh, I'm really doing this off the cuff, um, is if you guys want to contact me, you can do it through multiple ways. I think now I'm advertising my Discord handle, and that'll be fine. I can live with the DMs if I ever get them or what have you. If you ever want to collab, I'm up for collabs with almost anybody unless I looked at your content and I don't think it's suitable for my content. But if you're into Dark Souls lore, if you're into video game discussions or something, I'm up for collaborating. So everybody have a good time and thank you so much. Bye. Oh, and last thing, fuck. Last thing. Special thanks to Sen and Wenders. I used Sen has an archive for some of the resources, and I have used the archive here in my research. Thank you so much to Sen. And thank you to Wenders for his French translation of the Design Works thing. And yeah, bye.